let's look at one of the biggest conflicts that's going on in the world right now, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And Donald Trump has blasted Russian leader Vladimir Putin, saying he's not happy with him. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
So, Mr. President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake.
Now, this comes after Russia launched a record number of drones against Ukraine, killing more than a dozen people. We know that Donald Trump has expressed admiration for Putin in the past, but he's showing growing frustration in recent weeks as truce negotiations appear to be deadlocked. Trump also posted on X that Putin has gone crazy. I mean, Hilary, what's your assessment of this development? President Trump is considering sanctions against Moscow now. How likely is that?
Well, that's really the next step, because what's the last resort? The last resort is something that most of us don't want across the world. But I think that the sanctions they could actually implement would cripple the Russian economy. He actually said that he fears and has always thought that Putin wants all of Ukraine. And President Trump has said that will be the end of Russia. I think that economically, there are levers that should have been pulled, in my humble opinion, a long time ago to put a far greater amount of pressure on Putin. Don't forget also the price of oil has really funded this entire war. I think there's a lot that could have been done from day one of this administration. And let's hope that that starts now, because there were 10, you mentioned that bombardment yesterday, there were 10 killed in Kyiv, and it's one of the greatest bombardments and drone attacks since the war began.
The Kremlin has responded, claiming that Donald Trump was showing signs of emotional overload after he called Putin absolutely crazy. Look, it's going to be probably embarrassing for Donald Trump if he's not able to bring this war to an end.
Well, yes, actually, you're very correct there, Gabriella, because one of the things he had said on the campaign trail was, I will end this war on day one, which was obviously something very measurable and something that certainly hasn't happened. I think it was far more complex than he or anyone in his team and staff recognized. A very complex issue. And I don't think that there's any end of this in any near term. I think it's only the sanctions that could actually start to move the needle.
Hilary, will return to speaking about other conflicts that are taking place around the world, but I have to get to this story about Macron because it is absolutely shocking. French President Emmanuel Macron has been assaulted by his wife, First Lady Brigitte Macron. Now, the incident where Brigitte appears to slap her husband has been caught on camera as their plane was about to disembark to Vietnam. This is the vision. Look, Emmanuel Macron is dismissing the video that is going viral, saying they were just joking, they were just play fighting. But Hilary, Brigitte Macron is a 72-year-old First Lady. That makes her a leader. The eyes of the world are on her. It's absolutely not okay. And I don't think anyone is buying this spin from Macron that he is saying it was just a joke. What's your reaction?
Well, if it had been just a joke, then they would have been giggling and holding hands and laughing down the steps all the way down there, the gangway, but they weren't. It was frigid. It was icy. She did not take his hand. He did not take hers. What I think is interesting is the way that there was the slap or the attempted slap, and he, looked aghast. He looked horrified. And then he quickly, immediately put on this fake camera-ready smile the moment that he saw all the photographers down at the end of that stair. So I think that tells everything, the way they came down with an icy steps there.
Absolutely. Look, I'm in shock watching that vision. I think Brigitte Macron needs to address the incident, possibly apologise. But returning to the US, Donald Trump has delayed the 50% tariff on the EU from June 1st to July 9 after a call with the President of the European Commission. Now, this is to buy more time for negotiations.
We had a very nice call, and I agreed to move it. I believe June 9th would be, July 9th would be the date. That was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that. And that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
Hilary, is Donald Trump being fair here? He's, of course, always criticised for being pretty chaotic, but is this part of his strategy?
Well, yes, because don't forget the EU has 10% tariffs on everything coming in from the US, whereas the US only has 2.5% tariffs. That's why there's this massive trade deficit, Gabriella. The US imports 43.1 billion in products from the EU, and the EU only imports and returns 6 billion. So massive trade deficit. It's never been fair. The EU really has always thrived on regulations, whereas, of course, the US thrives on innovation. And while the EU is always griping that they don't have the Google, so they don't have all the high tech, they don't have all the entrepreneurs, well, it's because of all the regulations, Gabriella. They don't have that kind of innovation over there. So they don't have the same, there's no way they're going to be able to have all those products over there. What this comes down to is that the EU is really having sort of a collective action issue, a problem, because you've got the German car manufacturers and the French produce, such as French wine. They're pressuring von der Leyen. There is no such thing as one united EU. It is 27 different countries with different agendas. And I think what you're seeing is the reason that she placed this call, she wants this to be delayed, is because she knows she has to do some negotiating very quickly now.
Okay, let's look at the situation in the Middle East. And Trump Special Envoy Steve Witkoff claims that terror group Hamas tried to pull a bait and switch on the latest ceasefire deal by altering the terms of the proposal. It's reported that Hamas claimed it had been presented with a new US proposal that would see a 70-day ceasefire and the release of 5 living hostages on the first and final days of the truce. But a disappointed Steve Witkoff has blasted Hamas, claiming that the terms of the deal he had actually sent to them were very different, and that included the release of 10 living hostages and 19 hostages that are now dead in return for 45 to 60 days of a ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners. Now, just reading this, it's heartbreaking. It shows how difficult the situation is that, the United States is trying to deal and negotiate with a terror group. And of course, Israel is constantly being criticised for its strikes against Gaza. But the reality is that Hamas refuses to release the hostages. That option is available to them. Hilary, there was hope a few months ago when we were seeing hostages return back to their families, that maybe this war and this conflict could come to an end. It's still ongoing. It's still awful to see that we are still in this situation. Where is this heading?
Well, Gabriella, that is a very good question. I don't know who knows the answer to that, because what I would say is obviously Netanyahu and the Israelis, what they want is they basically want to see, the Palestinians and Hamas obliterated, because they fear another October 7th. And why not? Obviously, and I think that what's really sad about the global dialogue is people aren't talking about, and the global media isn't really talking about October 7th, what Hamas did. What I have heard and read is that the Palestinian people are very sick and tired of Hamas, because Hamas is taking any relief, any aid that comes in, they're just taking it for themselves. Now, back to the agreement, I just would say simply, there has been conflict, there have been wars, there has been all of this happening in the Middle East since the beginning of time. I don't see it ending anytime soon. And I think the Israelis are diametrically opposed to any kind of negotiation, and Hamas isn't to be trusted.
Let's talk about the talks between Donald Trump and Iran. Donald Trump said that US negotiators had a very good talk with Iran, with an Iranian delegation over the weekend, as he seeks a deal to prevent Tehran from developing a nuclear weapon.
Talks with Iran yesterday and today, and let's see what happens. But I think we could have some good news on the Iran front. Likewise with Hamas on Gaza. We want to see if we can stop that. And Israel, we've been talking to them, and we want to see if we can stop that.
Now, since returning to office, Donald Trump has revived his maximum pressure campaign on Iran, backing talks but warning of military action if diplomacy fails. But now, after multiple rounds of nuclear talks, is an agreement actually close?
I think it's closer than it has been. I think this is what the Iranians want. Don't forget, they don't want their economy crippled. They have been isolated globally. So I do think this is something that is closer than certainly some of the other conflicts or anything else that we've been talking about. So I think that there is hope on this front, although what they don't want to do is the very thing that President Trump wants, which is no nuclear development, no further nuclear development. That has to come to an end. And of course, that is the sticking point. If they'll concede on that, do you think we'll see some progress? Yes.
Hilary Fordwich, President and founder of Strelmark, thank you so much for your time and joining us on Power Hour.
Pleasure, Gabriella.